So we've got a couple of guests today. I guess one of them's the guest and one of them's the interviewer, but neither of them are me, so I get to introduce both of them. The interviewer today, he was a forum guest last spring, a great friend of the university. He works for Maverick, which is a management company that manages people like from Lil Nas X to Madonna to U2 to Britney Spears to Paul McCartney to like all kinds of crazy heavy people. So Scott Rodgers works with Maverick. He's been here before and will be here again. So he's going to be doing half of the conversation with our guest. Rosa Asciolla is the head of North American artist and label marketing for Spotify. She's a Loyola graduate. After me, but way before y'all. She's got a business degree, and her claim to fame from Loyola was when you went to orientation your first year and the people who led you around were called crew leaders. She's the one who made up that name. I know, affecting your life. Please welcome Scott Rodgers and Rosa Asciolla.
Hi, everyone.
Can you hear us? Okay, great.
So some
Hi.
of you may have seen me before, and I'm really not very good at this, but I really want to bring my friend Rosa here because she's a former graduate of Loyola here in New Orleans, and she's just one really inspiring young woman who I've watched her career path grow probably over about 7 or 8 years now. And I don't call you up for free Spotify accounts anymore every 6 months. You know, and getting involved with the university, I mean, really sort of one of the things we want to try and do is from time to time just bring interesting people here and just have a conversation with everybody. And we'll open up to the room at some point, but I'm just going to ask Rosa a few questions. We're just going to have a conversation. And I think as Jeff said, she's head of artist and label marketing for North America. Explain what that is to some of these guys here.
Sure. So I can go back to probably the beginning of when I started at Spotify about 7 years ago, and I think it'll make sense to where we are today. So about 7 years ago, I started at Spotify, and the way the platform was set up was obviously we had to license the music from distributors and the record labels. So there was a licensing team that was doing kind of like that more, I guess what you could call unsexy stuff. There was a label relations team that, of course, when the music's being licensed by those folks, you want to be able to call someone and be like, to whether it's support, help, marketing, whatever it is. So that team was much smaller, but was mainly focusing with the label constituents and distribution. And then there was an artist services team. So they were all pretty much very distinctly different. I was on the artist services team, and that team was working with people like Scott, and we were working with artists and managers directly. At that time, people didn't really know what streaming was. Like, you can reference things like Napster.
A lot of them still don't.
Totally. But they're still doing it. You know, so you could say like streaming music, but it wasn't really clear. And also streaming music, the economics of it was disrupting the way the music industry was traditionally based. So the team was run by a guy who actually was an artist during the time, but took a little hiatus to run the team, and we were working with artists and managers. There was a team that was working with labels, and then there was kind of like the licensing team. And over the last 7 years, and this team has been around for 2.5, 3 years, we evolved from the more people knew what Spotify was, the more competitive the landscape got. We started to combine the teams because we started to scale support. So instead of having just me answering artists@spotify.com, which was also my email address for a long time, so I answered every single artist email. We launched a website which was super transparent about best practices and about the economics of streaming. And then we also launched Spotify for Artists, which provided a lot of transparency so that you could take your data and you can decide what you want to do with it or how you make business decisions. So we scaled a lot of that support because ultimately a few humans can't do that. And what we believed was a differentiator for what we do is we always want to be the best partner to artists and their teams. So we kept that partnership and relationship element with artists, managers, and labels, but we also added marketing. So I'm sure you've seen billboards or seen experiential things that we've done. And so we kind of added a whole nother layer to that and brought that to the business.
Okay, so probably when you started at Spotify, there may have been, what, 35, 40 million people on the platform?
Oh, like
Maybe.
not,
Not
yeah.
even that big?
Oh, no, it
So
wasn't,
I'm
it
thinking
wasn't.
7, 8 years back. And now there's,
But
what,
yeah.
248, 250 million people on the platform?
Yeah, crazy.
And probably about half of those people are maybe monthly subscribers and half are sort of on the sort of ad-supported, sort of freemium.
Exactly.
That's pretty rapid growth in such a really short space of time. You know, but, and I know this is sort of more of a general question, but you're very much in the artist and label side, and you're supporting that. But how do you see the growth, say, in the next 5 years?
Of just like the platform and.
Yeah, because you think, okay, if you've got 250 million people, which is a lot,
Yeah.
and Apple might have 150 to 200, I don't know what they're at.
Yeah.
And then all the other smaller players. So if you're looking at maybe close to 500 million people streaming music in the world,
Yeah.
not including YouTube really, because it's a different kind of platform. You know, do you think you're peaking, or is there a long way to go?
So some of you might have seen that. So obviously music is very much at the core of what Spotify is about, and obviously being anti-piracy and making sure all rights holders are compensated as they should be. But we've also moved into the podcast space, and I actually saw the podcast room, which is super cool.
But you're actually doing something really interesting because, sorry to digress, you're doing podcasts to support new music releases as well, right?
Yeah, so there's we have done a campaign with an artist called MXM Tune, who she's an incredible artist, but she's an independent artist, so she doesn't necessarily have the backing, whether it's financially or if it's the ecosystem that necessarily a major label artist does. But we were seeing her blow up on TikTok, we were seeing her blowing up on the platform. And, you know, for artists, we love to always try something new. And we don't always have the opportunity to do that for every campaign. We try to make them all special. And someone like her, she was very much like, you know, she made all of her music in her bedroom. She started.
Pretty much like a lot of these guys here,
Yeah.
if they're not using the facility in-house, really.
Exactly. And you know, she was posting it herself on SoundCloud, and then all of a sudden people started using it on TikTok, and she had this momentum around her, and we started to notice it. And she happened to start working with a management company that we were pretty close to. It's the same management company as Lauv, if you know who Lauv is, and someone that we worked with for a long time. And she agreed to work with us. We built a series called 21 Days, and it was actually the 21 days of her in a studio in New York, talking about the creation of her album and meeting the producer for the first time and her whole creative process. So we've used it around the launch of releases, and then we also license other podcasts, and people can upload podcasts the same.
How has that been received?
Just podcasting generally?
No,
or-
this one,
This
specifically
one?
looking at the podcast around the new artist launching.
I think it's really interesting because obviously you have to be really open with the process, and some people, as you know, all kind of have a different creative process. It worked for someone like her because she was really happy to be super honest and let us be a part of that process, and it also happened over 21 days, which was the series, so it worked perfectly. But yeah.
Because you see sort of, there's artists like Dolly Parton who's got, which I haven't heard the podcast, but I've been told to go listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
People say it's amazing. So that's like a legend who's doing podcasting. Now we're talking about doing a brand new artist doing podcasting.
Exactly.
You know, but I'm trying to look at sort of people here who are making music, or people here who are just in content creation or want to be managers. You know, like
Yeah.
it's just trying to spark new ideas. How do you find that sense of discovery around new artists and learn about them before any journalist is writing about them, before anyone's reviewed their shows, when it's that day zero, day one? Again, like some of the guys that came up here before we came on stage talking about their music, new EPs out and things. It's like, how do you get noticed today? You know, so this is sort of one of the things that I'm fascinated about. You're at the forefront of it, and I'm trying to learn at the same time. Everyone here is trying to learn.
Yeah, I think the podcasting is interesting because it's another way of storytelling.
Yeah.
So all different types of content creation or marketing, whatever, it's about storytelling, about whether it's your creative process or about you or what you stand for. And so for her, I think it was very much about, this is kind of like how she wanted to tell her story, because she was recording videos or she was recording music, and you know, no one really kind of got to get behind the curtain, and this was an opportunity to do that.
Going back to sort of say, because we digressed a bit there, just the growth on the platform. And why I wanted to talk about the growth on the platform is because really we've seen times change really fast in music, where you could make a living from making music as a young artist to all of a sudden it being really difficult to make a living making music as a young artist. And that's because people stop buying physical product, really, unless they're buying the nice vinyl edition or something special. You know, but there still has to be growth on the platform in order for the revenue to be shared, because right now it just feels like it's, if you're in the top 1%, you're having the best time of your life. You know, if you're Post Malone today or someone like that, you know, life is good. But if you're one of these kids and you've got a great EP and it's really cool and 1 million people listen to it, it's pretty hard to pay your bills on that. You know, so thus we need these platforms to grow in order for the equity to be shared further. So again, from my side, I'm like, how does this grow? Are we peaking, or are we just trying to convert old people now who maybe don't sort of live on the platform, or those people maybe bought 1 CD a year or 2 CDs a year?
Yeah.
You know, like, what is our future growth market? And I guess people still don't really know what streaming is, other than everyone in this room, because you eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. So we know, you can't take it for granted. Guys, all the guys who want to be lawyers over in the other school know what it is. But
Totally. Yeah, I think that, you know, we often take it for granted, either if you're super passionate about music, and like, that's how I discovered Spotify before I even worked there. It was actually a friend here in New Orleans was like, have you heard of this thing called Spotify? So if you live and breathe it, or I always say, like, if you live on the coast and you are part of the big cities and you know about it, but the reality is there's so many untapped markets for where people will actually use streaming. I mean, a lot of people still use the radio. A lot of people also stream on things like YouTube, not even YouTube Music, but like YouTube itself. So it's more about, I think for us, it's about ubiquity and all platforms. The reality is with Spotify, we're an app, right? So you can be on a Samsung TV, you can be on a Sonos speaker, you can be on a Samsung phone or an Apple phone. So I think there's things like ubiquity. I think it's looking at, you know, my mom wants to go to Spotify not to discover new music, but to listen to Broadway.
Yeah.
So how do I actually get, and this isn't necessarily specifically my remit, since I focus on arts and label side, but I do think it's important to think about the different audiences and how we are supporting, obviously, the mission of Spotify. But the reality is there's a lot of untapped spaces that we haven't quite even, you know, hit the surface. But yeah.
you touched on something there, and I want to ask a question. Do you see yourself as working for a music company or working for a tech company?
Yeah, that's it's a hard question. Depends on the day.
I mean, 'cause I know you're like the world's biggest music fan, you know,
Yeah.
and you've ended up in this job, and you're working with great artists and great labels and great people.
Totally.
But are you working for a music company or a tech company?
So I consider myself working for a music company. If you asked anyone on my team, or if you asked people within the music team specifically, they would be like, hands down, I work for a music company. Like that's all we do. We live and breathe it. But the reality is we have almost 5,000 employees around the world, and the platform doesn't run itself. They're constantly innovating. They're building new tools. They have to make sure the platform works.
Yeah.
So there are people that are doing all of that all the time. So
And then that's the same. You could look at like a big record company.
Yeah.
This, you know, in the physical world, there's still people who be making CDs and packing boxes and driving trucks around the country. So there's all the different sort of sides to the big company. But
Exactly.
I guess in the forefront, you still feel it's music.
I feel like it's a music company, but I totally empathize with how people perceive it as being a tech company, because you know, our music team is not the majority of the 5,000 people. That's definitely not how we're structured, nor do I necessarily think that would be the right way for them to spend human resources. I think innovating on the platform and making sure it is the best place for creatives and for artists to have their art, to bring people in and to be everywhere, I think is really important.
I always see Spotify as being really, they were the first to market with this product on a global scale, even though there's still markets that are still to be opened in. But on a mass scale, they were very much the first, which I think in any business, you know, makes you like a leader. You know, back to the VHS and beta argument in the 70s, 80s, you know, beta was a better product, but VHS sort of won the war.
Yep.
How would you differentiate what you do with the other big players, Apple, Amazon, and then the smaller guys like Tidal, Deezer, and so on?
I mean, the thing is I think we were in a lot of markets first. So if you think about when you, like you said, if you've adopted something early, you tend to stick with it. So there's like a psychology to that that is true. Like whether I might like another product or not, I mean, I prefer Spotify, but I think independently of working there, it's because I used it first. Like everything else kind of came after.
Yeah,
so
likewise.
it's hard to give anything else a chance. So I think we're lucky because we were first in a lot of those ways. But yeah, I think that it's definitely a competitive market, but we have data about how people have interacted with our product for a really long time, which it's easy to make code look like the same platform as another platform. We've seen it happen when other platforms have launched. But the reality is how we service users, how we...
Because you're actually starting to share this information with the artists and the rights
Yeah.
holders as well, which is great.
Exactly. So we're able to make sure that that you stay within the experience. Because so even going back to like, the podcast element, ultimately, the more people are staying within Spotify, the more likely they are to either discover a podcast or discover a new artist or go back and find an artist that they love that they forgot they liked. Yeah. And that can be like your summer rewind. If you're like service something that's like, oh yeah, in 2015, I was listening to Fergie or whatever, and you like forgot, and then you listen, you're like, oh, I really like that song, and then you stay and you rediscover and you share. So I think our platform, from my personal experience not working at Spotify, I actually think it's a richer experience so like from a user perspective, I actually think it's a richer experience.
But again, you touched on just the tools that you're offering that other platforms aren't offering.
Yeah.
Which is super important. So I don't know if there's anyone here, like one of the girls was on stage before we came on who's just launched her EP, for example. I'm not sure if she has the tools that she's learning, even if it's a really small group of people, may just be people at school who are listening to her music. But does she have access, for example? And I don't know if she's here. Maybe she does or doesn't have access. And this sort of brings me back around to sort of say more of a business. We can all read about record labels receiving like windfalls from all the streaming services. They're just because of the sheer volume of people who are streaming. So it's finally bucked the trend, and they're all having record years with their revenues. Do you think that falls down to, like, say, what we're talking about, independent labels? Do you think independent labels are seeing any of this, or is it just really the big three?
I think...
Because you work with all the labels, right?
Yeah. All labor, majors, indies, distributors. I mean, all the deals were so different. I actually don't know about how the indies...
Because I'm just purely thinking of survival of the ecosystem.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think what streaming has helped do is to create a model where you can create, a menu of things that you want for yourself. So it's allowed record labels, majors or indies, to actually think about when they're signing an artist, what are the things that are really important to them? Is it just radio? Is it marketing? Is it promotion? Like, what are the things that you're looking for? Are you looking for an advance? So I always think about companies like AWOL is really great. Like, you can go through AWOL for distribution, and they're great. I know their team, they're awesome. But then you can also work with them to build out a structure where you get an advance, and they help you with marketing and promotions. So it really varies for everybody. And so I think what's been really interesting is how, everyone's been able to kind of create their own deal that works for them.
Yeah. And again, I'm just trying to still find the benefit of, say, doing it yourself or being with an AWOL, who are just really an aggregator, distribution company. Do you see any benefit? I mean, because you see the artist, because you have at your fingertips, the best data to see this is happening. Why is this artist all of a sudden there's a buzz over here? You just see this, and none of us do.
Yeah, I think again, I think it's what works for everybody and their own circumstances. At the end of the day, though, I mean, you as an artist is what a fan is going to fall in love with and want to listen to, whether your music speaks to them, whether they connect with you. I think about artists that were indie, or some still are, And I fell in love with who they were and their message, and nobody else can specifically do that except you. And so with social media and Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok and all of these things that are so popular, you have your audience at your fingertips. And so once you have that, you have leverage to be able to make whatever decision you want. And, then, sometimes you just have to be smart and you have to put an amazing team around you and, make good music.
Yeah. It's sort of almost coming back to sort of where a lot the weight's falling back to you as a company, because again, your EP could just start getting traction, but again, no one else in this room really knows it, kind of except for you, or people are going to be giving you feedback, we love your songs. It's almost like coming back to you to try and help, almost like amplify that in a way, say, this is really great, we're going to put this over and like, give this a spotlight in our independent sort of music sort of platform, just to try and, give it some focus if everyone in your team, but then you end up becoming curators at the same time saying, well, I like this, or I don't really like that. So you get small teams, and so you really have a lot of power now, which is both good and bad.
Yeah, I think the good thing is, so for example, part of the reason why it's important to deliver your music early is because there's the playlist called Release Radar, which is algorithmic. So if you deliver your music at least 7 days in advance, it gets picked up in that algorithm, and it's amazing what you'll see in your analytics is like how many people are just listening and discovering you from something like Release Radar. So that actually is just based on audience segments and music that we think you would like based on your previous listening history. So it actually democratizes it quite a bit. So we serve you music that we think you'll love too, in addition to having programmers that will create playlists that are based on specific genres or formats or cultures. So we also are, I think genres are very fluid now. So if you think of a playlist, and I don't know if any of you have seen it, called like Pollen or Lorem, they're really great. And we have an amazing team that works on those. And those are more like if you put like a Frank Ocean next to a K Tronada, next to Grimes, there is an audience for that. So, we're trying to certainly look at things that way as well, instead of just being like, it's top 40, it's rock, it's whatever. I think we're all humans. We if you search optimize things, you're like summer party or beach day or whatever, you want to have playlists for that. Yeah. So we constantly have to think about ways that it's not just format based, it's actually helping you find songs that you love, or we know that you love because you've listened to them before, and then serving you those. Yeah. And that's what I think Spotify does really well.
Just quick one for the room. How many people here, just for a quick show of hands, listen to music on Spotify? And then how many say listen on Apple? Okay. And then how many people are on, say, Amazon or Tidal or any one of the other smallers? Okay.
That's
all right,
so
then that's a pretty, everyone here is within 2 or 3 years the same age, and, everyone listens to music, whether they make it or not, everyone listens to music, so that's just a really interesting sort of group. Then back to the Spotify group, how many people pay? And then how many people are on freemium? Wow, okay, that's great. It's amazing.
Really great.
I know.
Done.
I wish it was done like this everywhere, but I know this is sort of very different. Okay.
Yeah, I think they have a question up there if I want to ask her.
Yeah, sorry.
Hello, I'm Joss. I'm an artist. I was wondering when you're going to make those little videos, the short 8-second clips for songs. I'm wondering when you're going to make those available to everyone, because I know I read about it somewhere and it said that y'all were kind of testing it out on certain artists. But I would be really interested in that if that was available.
I think if you go to the Spotify artist website, I think you can submit to be considered in the test group, and it'll eventually, we'll hopefully eventually launch it, but you can go on the website and submit for testing. Of course. Where's that? That's payola, and you're not allowed to do that. Yeah. And none of our programmers are allowed to accept money from people.
That's just like old school radio, which that was banned in the U.S. as well.
Right, so we should differentiate playlists that are managed by Spotify editorial versus just, I've developed a reputation as Jeff's cool free jazz playlist, and if you give me $5, I'll put your track on it.
Exactly.
That's what you get. That's,
I mean, actually not $5, it's a free jazz playlist. But it's,
So in today's market of changing genres and evolving genres and maybe even genre disappearing, how do we as artists navigate communicating our genre to Spotify, and are you guys doing anything to prepare for the future when people are fusing more and more different sounds together?
I think we probably helped encourage that, for better or for worse, because we don't work based on format. Like with radio, and Scott could speak more to it. I've never worked in radio, so I feel like it's a vacuum of something I don't know, so I won't speak about it. But I mean, I think that the way that we operate is like your release radar can be country, hip hop, pop, folk Americana if you want it to be. So I think Spotify's primed for people to listen to what they want to listen to, which might not be format based, which is way the industry traditionally operated. So I think I don't think you have to define a genre when you submit in Spotify for artists. When you deliver music to us, you can tag different genres, so it like helps inform what you do, but also people like put pop all the time when the song is like not pop. Like people, try, but we listen and then we're like, well, it's not, and then we have to move it to the place where it should be. But so you can like define it to us through that submission process. But I would be less focused on being like, I have to be like in this particular playlist or this particular genre. I think what I've noticed, what people are falling in love with is like the people, the message, the artist, the music. It's not necessarily like being so focused on that genre piece. That's what I would focus on.
Do you feel that's something that's missing right now, or not being catered to you specifically?
I think that it's possible that artists are getting lost in the shuffle, because especially traditionally, artists get a lot of views and presence from being within a scene, and since scenes are dissipating and floating, it's harder to find your people.
Do you think it's a good thing that scenes are dissipating?
I think the end result is going to be amazing. I think right now it's just really confusing.
Because one of the things say that we're in a world now where you can go home tonight, write a song, make it live to the world. 20 years ago, you couldn't do that. You had to be found by someone like me or any one of my colleagues. You'd be emailing saying, can you come see our show? We'd come see your show, and you'd be like, yeah, you're pretty good, but give us a call in like 2-3 months, and you might be better. And you give us a call and said, all right, let's do something. And it would be curated to the point before anyone in this room would ever hear you record anything. And you could record something, we're like, you know what, it's not good enough, let's work on that and go away again. It might take a year before you get something live. So everything has been refined, and it's almost like you've gone through this, I'm not even saying it's the right way to do it, but you went through a filtration system before anyone in the room could hear your music. And you could say, was that a good thing or was that a bad thing? Maybe the quality of music being presented might have been better, but maybe not. I can't judge that. But now it's just like it's a free-for-all. Every single person in this room could have a song go live tonight. Doesn't matter what it's like or how good it is. No one can judge that except the individuals. And that's where it's harder. How do you find this sense of discovery? We still need some kind of curation, even if it's everyone in this room who's doing the curation saying, we love your song better than your song, sort of thing. Because the best, shall we say, best endorsement is word of mouth. If you've got a friend who's going to say, you got to listen to this song, you got to listen to it. And so maybe we're doing our own sort of filtration. I don't know. It's this new world, which I kind of like. I don't know where it's going to go, but I like it.
I think it could be really interesting. I mean, obviously VR has been big in touring. I think it could be interesting. I do think that it's important Spotify continues to focus on what they do really well and like you said, grow the pie, and and make sure that we're catering to the audiences that we have and continuing to grow our audience. So I think there is an opportunity for VR and music and distribution platforms to find a way to work together. I just think it's a little bit of a ways away.
Yeah, it's definitely a ways away. I think with all the VR that's since the beginning of Oculus, who were really the first to, before they were even public, they were doing all these music demos, and it sort of didn't work. Like you couldn't do more than a couple of minutes before you felt car sick, with music. It was really more sort of prime for video games and things like that. But again, I think it's something that could happen, but we're not there yet. I don't know why we're not there. Maybe it's the resolutions or something. There's a reason we're not there yet.
Expensive.
Yeah, and it's expensive. Just the equipment's expensive. You got to, from an audience point of view, you got to go out and buy more equipment to actually produce the content. It's super expensive. You produced a bunch of VR content. Nobody cared. No, and that was big budget VR content, and it's like, okay, we got some PR from it, and we got more PR than people watching it. So it's down to people like you to actually, if that's something that interests you, get involved and
Totally.
yeah.
Totally.
Well, at that point, then Spotify come along and buy little startups and things and try and integrate. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
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 My name is Lena Ye. I'm also an artist as well. I really enjoy this conversation, by the way. I just want to let you know. My question is basically, I'm trying to understand what is the best way or like what's the process that you would recommend for an artist who's trying to prepare to release their music, but they want to make sure like they're making the right moves when it comes to the streaming, because that's where you see a lot of, well, if you're not touring, you're seeing, that's where you're trying to see some type of revenue or some type of profit in like, what you're doing and what you're making. So like, what do you suggest for someone who's trying to plan to put music out on streaming platforms but doesn't quite know the best way to go about it?
Is it just like how you set, like, can you explain a little bit more?
So like we were talking about the playlist. So like how would you suggest someone try to get their song put on a playlist for Spotify?
So exactly like we talked about, you just deliver the music and submit it through Spotify for artists. And then once you tag it and everything, it goes directly to the editorial team that programs, that actually personally curates the playlists. But then also by doing that and delivering it early, it gets swooped up in these algorithms, which really does help with a lot of the discovery. So you can't say like put X song on this playlist, but that's how it starts in the ecosystem.
But the one thing everyone's got to remember, and I think I said this to DJ before, it's anyone here can make music. Not everyone here is a musician. Some people want to have other jobs within the industry, be it management or just traditional executive style jobs. But it's not like anyone's going to do you a favor because you're a new artist or a young artist. You're sort of judged the same as like a Beyonce track or a Guns N' Roses track or a Lil Nas X track, or it doesn't matter. You can name any Billie Eilish. She's 17. So you are in the same game as them. You don't get a break. Oh, you're cool. You're young. But we'll give you a break and give you a leg up. Your music has to be as good in your eyes as your favorite music or music that inspires you. So you got to be your own harshest critic, I think. And don't just keep your fingers crossed it's going to get on a playlist or someone's going to find it. Again, whatever you do, whatever you're listening to tonight, walking home, if you think your music is as good or better, then you're in a good place. Because you're going to be your own harshest critic, really. But you can't just get away with it, say, oh, it's kind of okay. If it's kind of okay to you, it's kind of okay to everybody. So you got to be your own kind of, again, harshest critic.
I have a question now, and since I have the microphone, I'm just going to ask it. Is there some advantage to getting your friends to listen? Like, does it fill the algorithm in? Say I've got a new track and I get my friends to all listen to it, and they all also listen to like the new Kanye or whatever, and then it like connects in those ways. Is that sort of how those algorithms work?
You can't. I mean, I haven't personally tested it out recently, so I can't speak to personal experience. I mean, generally you are like in pools with other people, and they're like, oh, well, this person with the same listening type you might like this other thing, which is where Discover Weekly comes in. So that's songs that you haven't listened to, but people with your similar listening taste have listened to.
So like the
that's when
Amazon
Discover-
style, people who bought these pencils also bought these erasers.
Exactly. That's what like Discover Weekly is a little bit, and Release Radar is stuff that you are like are a high affinity fan of or follow. That is like your personalized New Music Friday essentially. Then Discover Weekly is more of the like, this person also listened to this thing. You might like it too.
Hey. Oh, sorry. I have
Hi.
a question. So it is my understanding that artists get paid by multiplying the percent of the royalty pool that y'all don't keep as a company by the amount of streams that a particular artist gets over all the streams that Spotify gets in general. So I was wondering what you think would happen if it switched to a more like artist-friendly payment method where it was all the streams that a particular user got divided by all of the streams that that same user is also like streaming. Did that make any sense?
It does make sense. I mean, Amazon's rolling this out as a beta to test, I think. So, for example, if you only listen to 10 artists a month, you pay $10 a month, you only listen to the same 10 artists, are you suggesting that your $10 gets divided by those 10 artists after the company, be it Spotify or any other company, takes their distribution fee, as it were?
Yes, I was wondering what you would think would happen if Spotify did something like that.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not in the licensing team, so I have no idea the
Good get
implications.
out, good get out.
I have no idea the implications of what that would mean. I mean, I think that, you know, there's a lot of headlines about certain things, but some of them are actually uninformed because they're really, really complex, and also everyone has a different deal. So, you know, in theory, perhaps that sounds great, and maybe it is. I actually can't speak to if it is.
I mean, I'll take on from that point.
Yeah.
Where it becomes really complicated is, say, if I was an artist and I had a massive hit in 1972, but I had the worst ever record deal. I signed a record deal with a 9% royalty, which was really common back then. And on top of that, there was a 15% packaging deduction. And what that meant, I don't know if, Jeff, you teach packaging deductions or not, where physical vinyl would have got destroyed in transit, you know, trying to get to the record store. They immediately take 15% off your royalty statement, even if there was no breakage. And then there may have been some other marketing deductions, maybe another 10%. So before you know it, you may have been on 9% minus the 15%, minus the 10%, you know, and any other chargebacks that may have gone on your account. So you're on a fraction of a royalty. So with Spotify paying 70 cents on the dollar back to the rights holder, you could have been signed to this really big major label, and you're getting a fraction of a cent for every play. That's where your method doesn't really seem fair, because on the surface you think you're doing good because the artist is getting paid, but ultimately by the time it whittles down, it was all down to the actual deal with the rights holder. So you, for example, you own everything 100%, you'd get 100% of that. But some other artists, and again, it all depends on their deals, you know, they might not get such an equitable share. I think we're still in the new world, though, and it's still an experiment. It's a really big experiment that's moving really fast, but I think we're still trying to get educated, and hopefully people like you are going to be figuring this stuff out in the next 10 years, once you leave here, and then you can tell us how to do it. I love my algorithm as well, actually.
Yeah.
Mine's perfect.
And like sometimes my friends request songs, and I'm like, "Ooh, can you
gonna
put it
mess
on your
your
phone?
algorithm?
Like, you can't mess
Yeah,
my
it's gonna
algorithm."
it's gonna mess it up.
Yeah, I'm the same.
I mean, I think a lot of the playlists I mentioned have been algorithmically based, but there's the curated ones that I think we have. I don't know, like not on the record. I don't remember. Like maybe it's like 3,000, like hand curated ones, and then the rest are algorithmically based.
Weekly is
All of that's algorithmic. So like all the other ones, like Lorem and Pollen, are hand curated. 'Cause I think it's hard, like that's part of like a culture of people that listen to a music in that way with those artists together. And maybe it gets super smart and we can make something like that for people. But the reality is that's where the human touch comes in. But for your listening taste, or if you have certain things like Summer Rewind or Discover Weekly, all those other ones, those are pretty clean and clear, and you know why you're going to them and you know what to expect.
Hey, I'm Margaret, and I'm an aspiring manager, and I was wondering if you have any recommendations on how to find or choose an artist nowadays, and also how to get a good foothold in the music business, especially because it is so competitive with all the easily accessible streaming platforms, and just about anyone can upload their music really anywhere.
I'll leave that one to Scott's a manager.
You sure you don't want to? I mean, really sort of, I personally think it's down, you can look at it two ways. Do you want to do it just for the business, or do you want to do it because you love it, right? I mean, let's face it, we're all here because none of us kind of really want a real job, right? You know, I mean, let's be straight. You don't want to work in a cubicle and show up and clock in at 9 a.m. and clock out at 5 p.m. doing something that's really mundane, because that will destroy your life. So you want to do something that you want to work 24/7 if you could, because you're inspired to do it, make music, produce music, work with artists and be creative with them. You know, that's why we're all doing what we do. And if you do that, you're gonna have your ups and downs, but you're gonna wake up every day happy to do what you do. But then, do you do that just because hey, I'm gonna work with this artist because they're gonna make me a lot of money? That's one way. Or I'm gonna work with this artist because I love it and I'll kill for it and it's amazing and it just really inspires me. And that's the personal taste thing, you know. And I think if you follow your gut instinct on something, and obviously you learn along the way, some things work, some things don't. If you want to be a young manager, you can go work for a big company, then you're just working there, artists. But you sort of learn on the job, and then you go out and want to do it on your own and discover some artists and do it yourself. I think you just got to follow your instincts, whatever music you love that really excites you. And again, everyone here can make a career out of music. It's all going to be on different levels. So it's whether you want to make $30,000 a year and be super happy on that and live on a farm somewhere, you can do that and be great. Or you want to make $1 million a year and you want to be living in New York and you want to be, going out, doing everything you read about in the books and see on TV. There's many different levels here, and everybody's different. And some people are really aggressive and just want to go and kill for it right now. And other people are just, take my time. Some people just want to work in music, but they want to be told what to do. And other people are more entrepreneurial. So I think you're going to discover that yourself.
Thank you.
I got another quick question for the room, though. With regards to, say, because Rosa's here from Spotify, does anyone feel there's anything missing from the platform that they would like to see or like to see get developed in the next sort of year or two? But see, that's very bespoke to you, and maybe you might be the only person in this room who uses that, but maybe this could be 10% of the room. So I think you just got to, again, we're in this kind of Wild West where you just got to navigate what's right for you personally.
Cool. Yeah, that's good
to know.
I think, personally, I would like to see more, curation from artists, if artist playlists were featured, or, on your homepage of Spotify or something like that. I don't know if y'all do anything like that, or...
We have artists, any artist can make a playlist, so they're making them all of the time.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
You can
It's open for
find
anyone,
anyone's.
yeah. Right. And that's down to the artist if they want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
True. Yeah.
So you got to start lobbying the artists you want to make playlists.
Yeah.
Also, I was wondering would it be beneficial, you think, if artists could submit or set a preference for what sort of playlist, or submit to specific playlists directly, as opposed to just sending it into Spotify for artists?
I think that people have assumptions about the hypotheses of all of the playlists, so everyone doesn't know everything, because that's what's private to us. So by everyone tagging based on the prompts that we have, it can go to the right people to listen. So you might assume, if I just want to put it in hip hop, that you just really want to be on Rap Caviar. But the reality is maybe it will end up on Lorem or left of center or something like that. So, but you might lose out on that opportunity if you just are so dead set on one playlist. So on the whole, and with all the music that comes out, the best way to do it is just to tag it the right way, and then it goes to the right people.
Thank you.
Okay, I was just wondering, I know you didn't really start in marketing, but I was wondering, as a marketer, like, I feel like it's kind of difficult to establish like marketing experience at like a younger age. So what would you see as like an applicant or like someone who's applying to a marketing job that would like pique your interest or have them stand out in a certain way?
So our team is, since we are like the industry-facing team, we do, education and partnership and the marketing piece, but there's a whole group of people behind the scenes that do a lot of the media mixes and the marketing mixes. So we have the creative conversations with artists and their teams, and then we go back to those teams and we take kind of what the artists are all looking for and the goals that we want to achieve together, and we figure out what that mix might be. So maybe it's content, maybe it's an event, maybe we can do media, whatever it is. So for my team specifically, I really like people to have a variety of different experience. I was a finance major here. I wasn't a marketing major here. So that was the experience that I came from, and as a consumer and, relatively in tune to what's going on, I think I use that experience coupled with the experts in the marketing side and media side to help inform how we make impactful campaigns. So I think there's a lot of ways to do it nowadays.
But I think you sort of raise a good question, though. Like, one thing I'm interested in, because everyone here in the room, you're all looking at music from one angle or another. What marketing do you think works? Because you're all aware of marketing, does it work, or are you just aware of it? You know what I mean? It's like, what is good marketing? I mean, Rosa does it for a living. I work with people like her and similar in other companies to try and figure out what marketing works, because right now, marketing can just be spending money and throwing it all against the wall. And let's just hope with everything that we're doing, some of it's going to stick or connect. Maybe we're going to hit someone in some form. Oh, they've seen this little ad on Facebook or Instagram or somewhere. Oh, and they've seen the billboard as they were on a bus, going down the street. Or they heard it in a car, in an Uber, on the radio or something, So it's something that it's so not refined and so much money is wasted. It's getting a little bit better, but honestly, it's like, this is stuff that you guys should be coming up with. Things that work, that's better, that you don't feel marketing's being pushed in your face all the time. How do you do it in a cool way so that everyone says, that's amazing, I'm going to check that out. If you've never heard of it before, I want to hear that song. Or, of course, the big billboards, you're coming in on I-10 and you're seeing billboards everywhere and you're sitting there like in the back of an Uber or something. You're going to see this stuff, but what actually connects? I don't have the answer to it, but I'm throwing this to the room, and I think it's stuff that you guys have got to be coming up with, because you are the guys who are going to be doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi. Thank you both so much for being here today to talk with us. So I was just curious. I know that you said this isn't the side of the business that you're on, but do you know why, or like the main decision behind why Spotify decided to spearhead the appeal of the Music Modernization Act clause to like raise and standardize pay for artists based on streams?
It is not my team, so I will not speak to it. I don't want to misspeak. I mean, obviously, Spotify supports artists and songwriters. We have a songwriter team and a publishing team that take all of it really seriously, and I think Spotify as a platform obviously wants to make sure everyone is rightfully paid. That was the whole point of our existence. So it's definitely something that's important to us. I don't have all the details about.
I mean, music piracy still goes on, because I remember when Spotify first started, and really, one of the main reasons they managed to engage most of the rights holders pretty quickly was because there was so much piracy going on, and it was to try and stop people, illegally downloading, and like, here, you can have this music, it's ad supported, just try and get onto a legitimate platform. And that was one of the ways that they started to build an audience. So back in Rosa, because, I work with artists, so I'm all about artist rights and making sure artists get paid. No one out there is perfect. Maybe Apple is trying to be blue chip because they have no free service, so they pay the most per stream. But then their service doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So again, nothing is perfect, and we're still trying to navigate this. And the hope is that it's all going to get better, as each year goes by. But it's only going to get better by healthy debate and conversations like this, obviously on a much bigger level in DC and with all the creators and with all the companies themselves. So it's still a little bit sort of nothing's settled, nothing's really set in its way. I mean, all of these companies could go down because none of them are making profits as well. So we all pay the money. I pay for Spotify because Rosa doesn't give me a free account anymore, so we're all paying, but the companies themselves aren't super buoyant, So the hope is that you can make healthy businesses, and in turn it'll be healthy for all the artists and all the people working in the industry,
Exactly.
long term.
Exactly.
I have a question. My question is, you know how there's like audio tree sessions that sometimes appear on like you know what an audio tree session is, right? Like the live sessions. They'll like get a band. You know what audio tree is?
No.
It's just like a music company, and like they get bands to come and they like interview them, just like a few questions, and they make them play like 3 or 4 songs, and they're like solid recordings. Like I like to listen to them, but there's only like 2 or 3 bands that I like that have them. But my question is, since you guys are able to get live audio tree sessions onto people's Spotifys, how come there's no like KEXP live sessions on people's Spotifys? Do you know what those are?
I'm thinking
it's the exact same thing.
Being honest though, I think that falls almost more into podcasting, because I'd be pretty sure they might be up there, but I'm still trying to navigate the how would I put it? How various podcasts, some podcasts live on the Apple ecosystem, some podcasts live in the Spotify ecosystem. So all the podcasts are starting to find their homes. And again, that's still a new world. And I think a lot of like the sessions you're listening to, I think they're out there, but they're more like podcasting rather than actually just pure audio streams. I could be wrong, but that's what I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's it basically is like a podcast plus they play music.
Yeah.
But would you guys ever consider having like, because I know there's like a music section. That's not what I'm asking for. But no, there's like, music section, podcast section, but like, would there ever be like a music and podcast section where it's like, maybe once a week or like, twice a week?
That ends up being down to the people who create them and what they want to do with them, being really honest. It ends up not being down to the platform. So the company that's making them, they have their own vision on how they want to have them access those podcasts or music sessions and how they want them to go out there. And ultimately Spotify will say, hey, I'll do whatever you want, just tell me what you want to do.
How do you find the balance between adding it in and making sure like it's not too bloated or people are like too unfamiliar with it? Because I've been using Spotify for like a while now. And there's been sometimes where I log on and like, where did everything go? But then I get used to it again and then it changes again. I'm like, why? Why did it change?
So usually we are often in like beta for a really long time. So I think we usually are in beta for long enough where the majority of people know what it is. Sometimes it's like, oh, the platform. I mean, I remember I was looking at pictures from when I started and I was like, oh my God, that's what Spotify used to look like. Like, that's insane. But like, I think that we spend a lot of time in beta and testing things, and then we launch it. And I think a thing that we continue to improve on and are doing better at is like tool tips. And so if we change something in Spotify for Artists, for example, or if it's on the platform, usually there's press around it, or we try to educate consumers about it, or we put tool tips or send emails for Spotify for Artists, like admins, so that they know what's changed. So we try to do a good job. I mean, I remember a long time ago and I'd be like, this looks totally different. Hopefully we're not doing that as crazy anymore, so hopefully you're not seeing that too much. But we try to like do, product marketing, consumer marketing, or creator marketing when it comes to that, to make sure everyone is really
Now we're back to the marketing question again.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Cool. Well, look, thanks, Rosa, for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you
for
so much
sharing
for having me.
Scott, Roger, Rosa, Asciolla.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.